Once again, feel free to chime in. I have my speaker on. Stop me at any moment. Chat with a question. It'll pop up on my screen. But as we get into chapter 13 and we learn of the two beasts of Revelation, I would have this initial question in your mind. I'm not, I suppose, yes. I will put Sarah on the spot because she's right here. You guys be thinking on that question. Where have we recently seen two of the same kind of character in Revelation, looking back at John's vision? So, Sarah, do you recall where we have seen two of the same kind of character in Revelation?
I'd say then I'd immediately turn to chapter 11 with the two witnesses.
Right on. We had just in chapter 11, not, 2 chapters ago, seen the two witnesses, and after examining that part of the vision, it became rather interesting to think of them as representative of the church's mission on earth. So if we then turn attention here to Satan and his demons and the devil, the world, and our own sinful nature, the beasts come to represent for us demonic activity seeking to suppress and oppress the witness of the church. So let us then turn attention to what is actually written for us. It's a brief little word, but from Revelation chapter 13, verse 1, Sarah, what's it say?
And I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns. What?
Start with verse 1.
I did. That is one horn.
It doesn't say. Look at that. So it turns out between 1974 and 2001, when the ESV was published, they decided to change the verse numbering from chapter 12 to chapter 13. Wouldn't you know it? See, I was expecting to hear Sarah say, and the dragon stood on the shore of the sea. All right, which frankly...
Well, it says that up here for me, up on,
Yep.
up here on chapter 12, the end of verse 17.
Okay,
Yeah, that's where it has it for me.
there we go.
Yeah, verse 17, the big long.
Mm-hmm. Sorry for the hang-up. Would you please go ahead and read from the "and he stood" through verse 1 here.
Gotcha. And he stood on the sand of the sea. And I saw a beast rising out of the sea with 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 diadems on its horns and blasphemous names on its heads.
What is going on with the sea in Revelation? The dragon is standing on the shore of the sea. The beast comes out of the sea. What are we to make, if anything, out of the sea? Well, you recall back in the throne room scene right at the beginning of John's vision, and he describes God sitting upon a sea of glass. Now, that was remarkable because a whole sea will rarely, if ever, be completely still. Certainly, we up here in the North Woods of Wisconsin are familiar with seeing bodies of water that are perfectly still as glass, but I would be hard-pressed to think of a time I remember seeing Lake Huron, Michigan Superior, or any of those Great Lakes, much less the ocean in the few times I've been there. And remember, John is in the midst of the Mediterranean, the Aegean Sea, when he is on the island of Patmos. So the people around him are familiar with the sea, and they would have never seen it still as glass. Why am I going on about the sea being still as glass in the throne room scene? Is because that was a remarkable show that God had calmed what normally is in turmoil. So that the dragon is standing on the shore of the sea shows the dragon standing right amidst on the shore of all the turmoil, the rebellion, the chaos that goes on in this broken world. The sea functioning there as a representative for chaos and destruction. So what is associated with the sea would be sinful rebellion and turmoil that we experience. To go into it with perhaps a little bit of more specific to John and his experience, to a believer's experience around the time of John's letter here, John's vision, if you were in the vantage point of the Holy Land, or even where John was on the island of Patmos, when you would look at the sea and you would look out over the sea beyond its horizon, you would be looking toward Rome. So certainly a beast coming out of the sea over its horizon, that would have worked well for people of John's generation. But you also have to remember this letter is written for churches all over. So not having the beast specifically be Rome for every generation and every time and place seems to be a good way to go about understanding this, but rather as a symbolic meaning of evil, sinful, rebellious destruction is preferred. The 10 horns, so getting into the description given there of the beast, it's got 10 horns, it's got 7 heads, it's got 10 crowns on the horns, which are all reprisals of what was said of the dragon back at the beginning of chapter 12. Thus, the dragon is giving to the beast his power, namely the horns, his wisdom, namely the heads, and his authority, namely the crowns, to the beast. So let's get into the sea. Gives us an association of sin, chaos, and rebellion. What does the beast from the sea represent? As we hear more about it.
And the beast that I saw was like a leopard, its feet like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. And to it the dragon gave his power and his throne and great authority.
So it's a scary beast, as it's got all of these terrifying parts to it. And apparently it has spots. I don't know what our deal is with being scared of things that have spots, but it's got all of those frightening aspects to it. John makes explicit what the vision of it having the 10 horns with the 7 heads with the 10 crowns, what all of that implied. Here John points out the dragon gave its authority and all that to the beast. So the representation of this beast that receives all of that from its master, the devil, represents human authorities and human nature that the devil can corrupt and turn to his purposes. So again, the beast from the sea represents human nature and human authority that the devil can corrupt and can turn to his purposes. And namely, we know what his purpose is from chapter 12, destroy the church, destroy its offspring, destroy individual Christians. So as John sees this beast, and it's a letter for all churches of all places and all times, this beast represents political authority, governmental authorities, social authorities, economic authorities, philosophical authorities, educational authorities, other such entities. Anytime that these things, which are in a turmoil and in a state of rebellion, represented by the sea, are turned to the devil's purpose, to destroy the church, to destroy her offspring, you are seeing this beast from the sea at work. So with that in mind, it does not become all that fruitful or helpful for us to identify one person as the beast. Certainly, single individual people and governments and the like and entities, they do the beast's work, and so they are included in the beast. Early Christians would certainly have thought of Nero. We later Christians certainly would think of, he's in the news a little bit lately because he's unhealthy, but dictators such as Kim Jong-un. But it's better for us to recognize beastly functions at work in individuals and governments rather than the individuals and governments being the beast that was supposed to have been seen by John. Again, holding on to the universal nature that this is a letter of vision for every church of every place. All right, that's a statement concerning what the beast from the sea represents. What is going on in verse 3 concerning this beast from the sea?
One of its heads seemed to have a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed, and the whole earth marveled as they followed the beast.
It is in order to erode confidence in the Christian gospel. It's in order to erode confidence in Jesus himself. The beast will set up false narratives and false characters that will pretend to Jesus' authority, that will usurp his authority. The fact is, John is seeing here in a vision that one of those beasts, one of those heads of the beasts, had a mortal wound that had been healed. He's seeing in a vision what Jesus had made explicit in his warning to his disciples, that many false Christs are coming into the world to deceive, if possible, even those who have been called by the gospel, chosen by the Lord. So as Jesus had warned them that that would take place, had warned John that that would take place, so John gets to see in this vision that this beast will seek to put itself in Jesus' place. Sarah, what does verse 4 say?
And they worshipped the dragon, for he had given his authority to the beast. And they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like the beast, and who can fight against it?
So the beast succeeds in its mission. The beast succeeds to turn people to worship not the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth, and his son whom he sent to redeem the earth, but to worship the dragon, who gives such power to these corruptible human entities and authorities, our own nature. So the earthly authorities that are so able to enthrall people so that they do not think past their earthly concerns, their material concerns. So this becomes the fear, love, and trust, not of God above all things, but the fear, love, and trust of earthly leaders above all things, which is idolatry. Further, when the question is asked, who can make war against the beast? The dragon certainly isn't going to, because the beast is exercising the dragon's authority. Who is the beast fighting against? Who is the beast attacking as at the dragon's behest and with his authority? The woman and her offspring. But when the people of the earth marvel who can make war against the beast, they're asking the question, why isn't the woman fighting as the beast fights? See, the dragon and the beast, they make their war against the woman. We see this when human nature, when human authority opposes the church. And how does the church fight back? in the same way that the human authorities and human nature oppresses and suppresses the church? No. In short, the woman doesn't fight back, at least not in the same way that you would expect human authority to fight, and the way that you see it attacking the church. So there comes that question, who can make war against the beast, acknowledges that the church, in its battle with human authority, which has been corrupted by the devil's purposes, does not fight in the same way that the earthly human authorities fight. That is a pretty significant thing for the church to understand about itself, that in the midst of suffering the attacks of the beast at the behest of the dragon, we don't fight back in the same way that we are attacked. All right, Sarah, could you please read for us verses 5 and 6? There's just a brief comment to make.
And the beast was given a mouth, uttering haughty and blasphemous words, and it was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven.
All right. 42 months. There she is again. We got introduced to 42 months back when the two witnesses were doing their work as a symbol for the time of suffering when the church is under attack, but certainly not the end of the story, only telling half of the story, with that number being 3.5 of 7. So 42 months shows us that one more time. We are seeing here the attack on the church that will not be the end of the story. But we also get the beast blaspheming God and slandering his name and his dwelling place, and slandering all of those who live in heaven, slandering those who have gone to depart and be with the Lord after death, those who are serving the Lord, his angels in heaven. They're blaspheming it because the beast, human authority, corrupted to the devil's purposes, doesn't honor God, doesn't care about God's authority. So, with this being the case concerning the activity of the church, concerning the activity of the beast, once again to say this, and I know I'm saying this a lot, but I really want you to hear it, concerning human authority corrupted and twisted and turned to the devil's purposes, this is the reason why I find it hard to believe that really any form of government or any particular government on earth can fully honor God, because it is of the seed. It is in turmoil and in rebellion. God reigns furthermore, getting back to the question, who can make war against the beast? Because God's church on earth does not fight in the same way, because God is reigning over his church in a unique, grace-filled way, and that is how the church exercises its authority. God is there reigning in his church with his grace. Here, sin is forgiven by God's grace. But over the earth, over the turmoil, God reigns with his righteous will. And in the turmoil, human sin is crushed as it rises up in rebellion. So the connection that I am not seeing to be made between any government here on earth and fully honoring God, because this is what human authority does, under the influence of the devil, it blasphemes God and slanders his name and his dwelling place. I would have us recognize the different goal and activity that the Lord has for sin in his church by the ministry of the woman. His goal for sin is to forgive it by grace for the sake of Jesus. But on earth, God's goal is to crush sin, to set it still. And that does have implications for how we understand what God is up to for earthly governments as he is for his church on earth. All right. We'll leave that there for now. It's a great big thought. And we will go to verse 7, and then we'll go again a little bit more quickly. Verse 7.
Also, it was allowed to make war on the saints and to conquer them, and authority was given it over every tribe and people and language and nation.
This is a frightening thing for us to understand, but the beast does have the authority and the power to overcome and conquer the saints, believers. The beast's authority will include the power to take away lives and livelihood. That is a profound thing for us to grab a hold of. The beast from the sea can indeed take away the lives and the livelihoods of believers. Human authority, twisted to the devil's purposes, can take away the lives of believers. Sir, can you read 13, chapter 13, 8 and 9?
Okay. And all who dwell on earth will worship it, everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who was slain. If anyone has an ear, let him hear.
We did hear the "if anyone has an ear, let him hear." John would have been very familiar with having heard that one. The book of life shows up in verse 8, and it's going to show up again later on in the 20s. The names written in the book of life, those are those who do not worship. In other words, they don't fear, love, and trust human authority. They don't worship the beast in idolatry. All right. So, to verse 10 we go.
If anyone is to be taken captive, to captivity he goes. If anyone is to be slain with the sword must he be slain.
So we get it restated for us here, what was put in verse 7, that the beast was given power to make war against the saints and conquer them. Here it is again. But the last sentence, this calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of the saints. Oh, I apologize. I was so anxious to get to it. I pretended like I heard her read it. That sentence is going to be repeated verbatim at the end of chapter 14. And it ties closely with the experience of the church at the end of chapter 12, that this is going to call for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of the saints. So, that saints being especially explained at the end of chapter 12, where you hear they are the ones who obey God's commands and hold to the testimony of Jesus. When a line gets repeated, it is an important thing. It indicates the importance of that particular thought. So as chapter 12 has rehearsed biblical history, now chapter 13 and 14, they are framing for us what a believer's experience is going to be in this life, suffering the attacks of the beasts, this one being the beast of human authority turned to Satan's purposes. So when this sentence shows up twice in this particular section, that we got our 10-minute timer. When this important message. It's that patient endurance and faithfulness is called for. That is a huge message to be had about what are we supposed to learn from being under attack by these beasts. It calls for patient endurance and faithfulness. Okay, so then we got the beast from the sea, and now let us meet.
Then I saw another beast rising out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon.
So we get another beast. It's a beast. So we know that it has malicious intent like the first beast. But it's from the earth. It's not from the sea. I don't think I'm going to really spend any time just now on what the earth could stand symbolically. But let us take it to understand that it's not going to function the same way that the beast from the sea functioned. You know, they're from different places. But then we get, it has a head like a lamb. Again, pretending to be Jesus, to be the Christ, or somehow trying to take his place. But it spoke like the dragon, which we remember the deceiving voice of the dragon. So the beast from the earth does good to we do well to understand the beast from the earth representing false religions. Those religions that would seek to take Jesus' place, that would speak deception from the devil to once again get us to fear, love, and trust in anything else other than God himself. So, and one of the things that the beast does,
It exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence, and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose mortal wound was healed.
it is instructive for us to note that the second beast gets people to worship the first beast, which, as you learn concerning the false religions, the other religions of the world, they, in a lot of ways, are helpfully understood to lead people to worship human authorities, especially political and governmental authority or social behavior, or sometimes even just nature, things of this earth. Take Islam, for example. It would have us establish a caliphate, a human governmental political authority. Mormonism, it would have you understood that so long as you have earthly wealth and attain to even more earthly wealth, that is the mark of God's favor upon you. To be a little bit more, I was going to say the word primitive, but that's maybe not quite how I wanted to put it. But animistic religions, the worship of various kinds of nature spirits, usually lead to sacrifices. And what's the purpose of the sacrifices? To have successful harvests, to have successful military campaigns, political campaigns, and whatnot. Again, the religion brings attention not to God and his unmerited love and provision for us, but to the concerns of this earth and to the authorities that take place here. Hinduism, with its caste system, certainly has our attention turned to things of this earth. Once again, the second beast from the earth, leading people to worship the first beast. All right, what does the beast from the earth convince people to worship? Well, you can sum it up. The first beast, remembering the first beast being human nature and authority corrupted to serve God's purposes. Okay, we're not quite ready to go there yet. So could you read for us verses, we just did 12. Yeah, give us verses 13 through 15.
It performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in front of people. And by the signs that it is allowed to work in the presence of the beast, it deceives those who dwell on earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword and yet lived. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might even speak, and might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain.
It can call down fire from heaven. Elijah can call down fire from heaven. It can make a image and set it up so that everybody will worship it. That's what Nebuchadnezzar did to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And sure enough, if Nebuchadnezzar did not attempt to kill Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego because they refused to worship the image, well, again, when the church resists these false religions that pretend to take the place of the true religion the Lord has revealed to us by his word, they will coerce people to worship human authority. And so when this is resisted, the church risks her life to resist this. Everyone risks their life to resist these false religions who coerce people to worship human authority. As we see the activity of false religions. Well, we already did that one. Sorry, guys. The significance of the mark.
Also, it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead. 17:12.
Yes, please.
So that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name.
Now, we got 2 minutes and 50 seconds left, and you might think to yourself, how are you going to get to all the details of what this mark of the beast could be? But let me tell you, it is just not helpful to get into many details about what that mark of the beast could be. Rather, what does this represent? A marking, a sealing. Those of us who have been baptized have been sealed by the Holy Spirit. We are already marked by the Holy Spirit. So this mark of the beast, once again, set up in opposition to the work of the Lord through the ministry of his church in order to be a false religion to lead people away from our God. What is this mark? It is the external evidence that you fear, love, and trust corrupted human authority, because a false religion has done what the devil has raised up the beast, the second beast, to do. That external mark, the significance of a mark, it shows that external, it shows that reality. As the sealing of holy baptism shows the reality of God's favor to us through Christ, so this external mark demonstrates for all a person's sealing and being bound to a false religion, which has led them to worship falsely the first beast. All right. Last verse.
This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666.
All right. This calls for wisdom. Sounds an awful lot like, if anyone sounds an awful lot like verse 10, with that warning given there. Now, in the first place, just simply acknowledge 6 is not 7. So 7 being that important number of divine completion. But also remember, man was made on day 6. And it also reminds us what Paul had taught us. Everyone has fallen short of the glory of God. So the number of a person's name in verse 17 may refer to something called gematria, but probably not. This calls for wisdom is instead a call to discern first the fear of the Lord, because wisdom begins with the fear of the Lord, not from the fear of the dragon. And so what we see with the beasts